Hey guys, how's it going? Ghostly Rich here today, and today is the start of part 3 on twin turboing the Corvette. As you can see, I've got the new turbos just kind of sitting here. One part that I noticed that I didn't put into part 2 because I just had the fitting arrive was a 5/8 to 5/8 fitting. This is the one that's going to go in between here and the other heater core hose. You just squeeze it in there. Just make sure you have already on your retainer rings, because what we're going to do is squeeze both sides of the line. Let's see if I can just lift this out of here. Not too worried about. There we go. Put that down. Too much Amazon. And literally all we do is lift this out of here and squeeze it in till it seals, like so. Now squeeze these two with the fitting and you're good as gold, or brass. Anyways, if we come over here, the other thing that we're going to be doing in this episode is moving our ignition coils. Now, there's going to be a few spots you can move them. If you wanted to, you can technically screw them into right here. Put them right here and right here. They'll be far enough away from your turbos, and if you ever have to do anything, you just reach in here to access them. I have considered doing that because then we would just run our plug wires up and around, but I don't know if they'll reach all the way to the other side. I got 5-foot plug wires, and I think they're still, that would be a really tight position to put them in, unless you ran them some way around and over here. Who knows? I'll play with it. Right now, what I think I'm going to do, right down here is that plastic skid plate. Well, what I ended up doing is I took it to a buddy, and he's going to cut me out on a CNC a metal version of the skid plate. If he can, then I'm going to show you down there. I'm thinking about putting all my coils in a line down right here. Then I can run my plug wires down under the engine mounts and my coil wires all the way to here. That way I'll have a set of plugs under here and under here. And best part is they're easily accessible. If I really needed to do something immediate, I could lift the car, the front end, drop that skid plate and have access to everything. Again, you could put them here, but again, I almost don't want them up high because I don't want them to pool heat. That's the biggest thing that we're trying to avoid. So again, I had to wait for plug wires, a plug crimping tool because we're making our own length, and the coils. Oh, and the most important cool new piece, this is the new ECS block. What this is going to do is, let's show you, goes right down there. Right where that ground is, there's a place there, and you'll see that there's an oil galley insert nut there and a block drain on the bottom. What we're going to do is take those two out, which I'll show you later on in the video, and then we'll place that plate on there. They're so awesome. They even, with the plate, give you a gasket and all 4 bolts. So we're set. So let's get into this. So like I said, once we wrap this in the last video, it's going to be up there nice and close. What I did is I turned the 2 clips this way, so that way, if you take a look here, the barb is in there and it's not going to chafe the wires. I'd rather chafe the heat shield on the inside than the wires any day. So now that's like that. Again, I've just moved these up and around. This area is pretty much done. So the next task, when you open that package from ECS, you'll notice that the plate is going to go down there. So before we pull out those 2 Allen keys, take the emery cloth they give you and just clean up that entire edged surface that's around there. The other thing we're going to have to do is take that 13 mil out that's going to this ground. So this ground, we're going to have to relocate it because it goes into one of the holes from which is going to seal our plate. I think it's awesome that they give you the cloth to actually go around and clean up the area and surface. So that way the gasket that they give you will seal the plate perfectly. So now I'm going to zoom in. It's that spot right under the block, right here. So again, go ahead and scrub this whole area all the way around the whole circle. In that area, while you're scrubbing, you can feel for the two Allen keys. There'll be one here and one up top. Both those Allen key bolts we're going to have to pull out, so that way we have access to both the galleys that go through that block. Super important. For that whole area, make sure it's nice and clean. See how clean mine is? What you'd want to do is if there's any dirt or foreign material in there, shoot brake or parts cleaner in there and wipe it down with a rag. Do not use paper towel. If you do, it can put particulates in there and that'll push all through your galleys, which is still not good at all. You want that area to be spotless and free of all particulates, because you'll feel how it's kind of like concaved on the inside. If there is any particulates in there, that's going to fill up with oil and it's going to take that and bring it into your motor. Make sure, again, it is super clean. I just hot tanked my block, not even like, I want to say 2,000 kilometers ago, because I had the motor out of this and I built it. So I'm still good, and I went through and made sure there's absolutely no buildup in there. If you have any buildup, take the time, clean it. It's not worth missing something. The Allen key to release the two Allen key bolts is an HW6, so go ahead, after you've made sure you've completely cleaned the full surface and everything, pull out the two Allen keys. You might want to put a bucket underneath it. You're probably going to get some oil that comes down. Depending if there is, I'll just tell you now, the gasket is right here with the 4 new bolts from ECS. So if you want, you can have the gasket ready to go and grab this part. You can even pre-thread the bolts and get it ready. So that way, as soon as you pop these out, you can hand thread those bolts in with that gasket. Just prepare it like so. The gasket only fits one way. Just make sure the plate is absolutely clean, and you know you're gonna again have a clean surface to mate up against. One last look at this beautiful piece. Again, this is going to be our drain, that's going to be our feed, and here we go. Go ahead, pull up the two HW6 Allen keys, and let's go ahead and bolt that plate up. If you've already drained your block, you'll be fine. As you can see, both screws are out. I have these ones prepped. I'm going to thread them all in, and then after we thread them in, basically you want to seat the whole gasket evenly, and then from there, I think I'm just going to torque this down to about 19 foot-pounds per bolt. Well, that's it mounted down there. Again, I ended up using a bit of blue Loctite, and I put all 4 13s down to 19 foot-pounds minimum. And now that they're at that, we can go ahead and relocate that ground. I might change my mind where this ground sits later, but I put it just beside the timing cover for right now, because there's an open spot in between right there in the center of the shot. And just like that, now we can run a feed up to here and then branch out. One will go to this side of the turbo and one will go to that turbo. Again, the feeds will be up top, the drains will come out the bottom. The drains will be AN 10, the feeds will be AN 4. Important. If you're running a ball bearing turbo, you need to run a restrictor. If you're running a journal bearing turbo, which is what this is, then you will not run a restrictor. So I've decided what's going to end up happening is this wiring harness is going to get tucked under the intake manifold. Why? It just gets it far away from the heat of the header right here. So if we come over here, that's exactly what's going to come on over here as well. That way this, even if I have to extend the alternator harness, it'll be much more worth it to try and get a nice path. Now, I believe for our purposes, we're gonna have a breakout harness that goes through from here and then goes down to another map sensor rather than the current, which is the mass airflow sensor. What we're gonna end up doing is we're going to be taking this, sliding it down through there with this cable. Now, before we do that, I've decided I'm not keeping the coils up here. Why? One less thing to be subjected to the heat. There's just so much going on up here. I thought about making brackets for up here, it's just not going to work out. Especially if we're trying to limit heat. It'll also make the top of the engine look nice and clean. Like I said, this wiring harness, when we're done, will be tucked under the intake manifold, so this will be a nice open section. By doing so, Rich, what are you planning on doing with the coils? Well, we're gonna run wires. I'm gonna be taking these connectors back and running new connectors. If you don't want to cut them, ICT Billet makes extensions. All you simply do is take it, plug it in, run the extension, and go. Why am I not getting them? Well, for me, after conversion, it was like $400 Canadian. For me, I can run the wire with brand new expandable loom and everything for under $100. It's not worth the extra expense. Plus, if I move these coil, I'm moving them once. Even if I were to take the twin turbo kit off, doesn't matter. I'll leave the coils down there and leave that looking nice. So this is the coil. People are gonna ask me, why are you relocating it to the pan that sits right there? There are so many other good positions, and I'm all ears. Like I said, I thought about up here, which is still pretty good, but that's still right in the heat zone, because you gotta think, that's the highest point of the hood. So when all the heat is rising, it's gonna go straight to these coils. The other thing that's gonna end up happening is on this side. Again, even if I space that or, turn this coil over, it'll be that close to the header, and so on and so forth. Again, I'll let you choose. You can definitely, some people might try to even use that K-Tech bracket and leave them up here. But again, look how close those connectors are to the header. The biggest thing I'm trying to do is much electrical as we can, get away from the heat. That is a really low point. There shouldn't be anywhere near the amount of heat down there. And again, they come with weatherproof connectors. The way that we're gonna do this too is it shouldn't have much water, if any, down there. Except for if, of course, you go and have any issues with your radiator. So one thing you could do is, one, I'm gonna elevate them. And two, the other thing I'm going to end up doing is when you have them down there, if you're ever going to do any fluid swaps, flushes, or anything, it'll be on the main panel, which you would pop anyway and come out. I'll show you that panel. I actually, like I said, I gave it to a friend of mine who has a CNC cutting machine, and he's going to cut it out for me. I'll show you guys what it's going to look like. Again, if you were to get this made for yourself, it wouldn't be too much. Now, another spot that you could mount these coils, if you got a coil mount, is of course down here. You could have all four of them mounted, and then if you ever have to access them, this little plastic tray, which is pulled out by screws all the way around, you can still drop it out. Will it be fun to get access to? 100%. No matter where you put these, they're not going to be very easy to access. I even had one gentleman say that he was trying to make one that would go above the fuel system down there. But for me personally, I'd rather not have my ignition system right above, right where my fuel is. Again, when I say that, I know this is pretty close to your fuel, but this is one thing, this is one thing. Actually having it right on top of your direct injection system is a whole nother. The next thing you're gonna want is some red tape or white tape with a really powerful marker. When I say that, I mean like a fast drying Sharpie. So that way, when we mark our wires, it's not gonna wear off, because if it wears off, you're gonna hate life. When we extend these wires, you need to, of course, keep track of every wire, where it's being extended from. All I've done is taken the one piece of wire loom off, pretty easy, very gently, just cut the tape. Do not go past the tape, meaning just lightly score it and then do the rest with your fingers. If you separate this, it makes it a little easier to see what we need to do. You'll see all the purple with blue go into one and all the black go into one. What does this mean? It means that for the purple wire and the black wire, we only need to extend the main one all the way down. So that saves us having to extend a bunch of wires down there. If you want to, you can, however, just simply run 4 wires per connector. I'll leave that up to you. If you don't want to, you can simply run, and this will save you time, you'll need to run 2 wires per connector rather than 4, because we'll run 1 main purple blue and we'll run 1 main black wire all the way down, and then we will simply branch out. The fun part is just simply going through, you'll see that 1 goes to each, finding the main feed and just running that main feed down with the main feed black wire. So that way we can extend those out to each of these coils. It sounds hard, it really isn't. So what I've gone ahead and done is put our firing order on each coil, so that way we know which is which coil. As you can see, 2, 4, 6, 8. Why? This is the 2nd cylinder to fire, 4th, 6th, and 8th. Other side, 1, 3, 5, 7. Took me a second there. So I've simply just ran my first wire, which again, I know I'll have a little bit extra because I'm putting that whole harness under there when I'm done. But I'll probably chop it right about here, so that way I can move it anywhere on that plate. And again, if I have a tiny bit of a service loop down there, it's not the end of the world. The reason why you see a loop down there is it has to go down to the line down there, because I'll zap strap it up with my oil cooler lines from when I did my oil cooler. Now that I have the first length of coil, what I can do is I can now, I'll mark that with a piece of tape, pull the second one, so that way I can see the difference in wire length. If I had to guess, it'll probably be about 3 inches. So like I said, I've gone ahead and measured, and I think 3 to 3.5 inches leg length on each of these should be perfect. So what I can do now is I'll cut that one, and then I'll make an entire wire bundle at that amount, and then I'll add 3 inches, do the next wire bundle next, so that way they're all prefabbed and I can just solder them on. What this allows you to do, rather than buying the pre-made ones already, is make them to your own wire length. Another important thing, make sure you're using automotive rated wire. As you can see, it's good for -40 to 85 degrees Celsius. This is important, Celsius, not Fahrenheit. If you were outside and it was 85 degrees Celsius, you would turn into ash. So let's go ahead and say, once again, automotive wiring. As you can see, what I've done is I have that one piece I've trimmed. Now I'm gonna take the whole loop of wiring I have here, and we're gonna go ahead and just tape the tip. I have expandable loom. I'm gonna slide it through the expandable loom and then cut it to length. If you've never done expandable loom, I'm gonna try and show you with my legs. And you do this, and then you work it all the way to the back, and then take your other hand, again, compress, adding more loom, and keep force feeding it till it goes all the way down to the end. We're actually gonna go a little bit longer than the ends, and we'll push back on the loom when we solder, and then slide it over when we finish soldering, so that way our solder joints are protected. As you can see, we've slid some heat shrink on here. Why the red, you might ask? Well, this is gonna be on our connector side, so that way we can actually label the wires as we solder them on. So what you can even do right now, just so you know the wire length you cut for this particular one, go ahead and just label it. For the first one, I had a measurement of 46. So now I'm gonna go the next one, which will be 49, and then it'll be 52, then 55. If you have a stripper like so, just set your wire length as you do. As you can see, I set it to about that much. Grab, squeeze, as you know, it'll just auto strip. So that way everything's at the same length. And by doing so, you don't lose any strands of wire when doing this. Again, I'm using 18 gauge wire. A trick for you guys using this loom, always heat the tip. The reason why is if you heat it with a lighter and burn it, it'll melt and then it won't fray as you extend it. Best suggestion I can give you, do it one connector at a time. That way you do not accidentally mix up your coil somehow. Because if you do, you'll be firing in the wrong order, and that is the last thing you want to do. So as you can see, I've gone ahead and I've soldered these guys up. And from here, don't forget your heat shrink. After you've gone ahead and soldered, slide your heat shrink over, heat it up, then we can slide this over, and then we can do the vehicle side. Now when you're trimming your connectors, make sure that you have as much space as possible. Again, going over this one last time, you have a black wire, you have a black with a white stripe or gray, whatever you want to say, and then you'll have the blue, purple, or purple blue, since blue is the smaller stripe, And that will be the consistency to all of these plugs. Then you're going to have one odd wire out. In this case, it's blue with a white stripe. In this one, it would be yellow with a blue stripe, and so on and so forth. Make sure, what I like to do is leave that is a white wire. What you can do is actually write the wire color on the wire if you really want to, so that way down the road you know the exact one, but your connector is going to be a giveaway. Meaning that if you were to ever splice this back to the way it was, all you have to do is go back to that wire color that's going to be on the connector. That's why we cut so low on these connectors, just in case. So what I'm going to do next is go to the first connector, which is up here, and I'm going to go ahead and up here, I'm going to trim it right here. For the purposes of this, I'm actually going to leave that 4-wire transition into one. And I'll tell you why. Because I know that a lot of you are going to probably not want to cut this and solder on the other side. You're just going to want to extend and have long runs right from here. So we won't get rid of these, we'll leave them. We'll just go right from the connector and extend right from the connector. And just like that, our connector is completely sealed. Our soldering connections are in there. And then from here, as you can see, it's kind of bowed out because I have it bowed out, so I can go ahead and now solder that end to the vehicle side. Just don't forget the color combination you used. Again, if you're doing the same colors as me, it's pretty easy. All I do is white to the marked wire, yellow to the purple, black gray goes to brown, and black goes to black. When you're done, it's going to look like that. Like I said, just have some heat shrink, put it over the tip, and there is our extension. I'll show you how I'll wire path it through there, and then we'll copy all of them. It won't really matter for this portion because of the fact that I will, like I said, tuck that underneath at the very end. But this is important. If you have the same manifold as me or another manifold, don't go through here, so that way you can still take off and put on the manifold without having to unclip and reroute your wires. Make sure you keep it like this, along under the throttle body, and so. As you can see, it's right here, goes down. I tucked it under the throttle body harness right here. And then down over here, comes down here, here and there. The turbo sits over here, so it's nice and far away from that line. And again, we'll reheat wrap this and we'll tuck all that into the heat wrap. It comes down here, and why does it go down there? Well, because if I go right here, it will reach over to here, because like I said, my coils are going to be going right here. I'll have coils right here and coils right here, or more central. I try to keep it away from the water outlets, so in case there ever is a coolant leak, it doesn't leak right onto it. I'm not gonna make you watch me go ahead and do this entire, like all 4 of these on this side and the 4 on that side, but what I will do and try to remind myself is to give you the length of the first coil and then add your 3 inches. Well, I just went and taped it all back up, and they're all basically the same length. One's a little longer, but they're pretty darn close. Good enough for what we're doing. So like I said, from here now, if I want to, I'm going to be pulling the intake manifold off later. I think I'm going to tuck it in underneath when I take the intake manifold off, rather than tuck it in at the moment. Again, ignore this for the most part right now until after I finish putting them under the intake manifold. But again, even if you wanted to, you could do a banded tape right here just to hold it. And when we come down over here with it, this is where we'll cover it in heat shield just to be sure. We might even cover it under the intake manifold. I'm not as worried there because although the motor gets warm, the loom will keep that protected. The heat shielding we really want for anywhere next to the headers, like the spark plugs. When we go to do our spark plugs, which again, we're gonna name the same as we do it, that is when you really want to be making sure you name and label them the exact same like we did. So this was coil number 2, that'll be spark plug number 2. Number 4, that'll be spark plug number 4. So that way the coil is igniting the right spark plug at the right time. For your driver's side, go ahead and take a foot off. We started off, well, not quite a foot. We started off at 46 last time. Let's go to 36, which is 3 feet exactly. And then remember, just do the same thing. Add 3 inches every single, as you go back. So 36, 39, 42, and 45. Something important with the driver's side, it is black blue instead of black gray. So all 4 coils that are going to be for that brown wire, if you're using the same colors I am, that is going to be like the passenger side. But the one that's going to continue changing again is, well, just look at all the connectors. You'll always see it's the one right beside the purple. So in this case, it's going to be, it's a blue, it looks like, and then green, and so on and so forth. For right now, what I ended up doing was just putting some security tape just to hold them, but they're all done now. As you can see, this is just right here. What I'll do is I'm going to actually heat wrap probably the whole thing up until here, and same with the other side. So that way it'll be a nice silver wrap underneath here, and it'll look really nice. So don't judge. I know this kind of looks tacky, but wait till it's back and down there. And then down here, like I said, it's just going to run along those lines. And if I go underneath the vehicle now, you will see we will have the tabs hanging down. So as you can see, these ones are ready to go for the 4 coils here. And then we'll have 4 coils right here on the metal skid tray that used to be here. Again, I'm going to have mounts on top of there, and it's going to sit flush right here. And as you can see, there is literally nothing in the way here. But something I need to warn you about, once again, is you're probably going to want to cover them of some sort, just because if you do get a radiator leak, there is a chance, of course, of it coming down here and onto the coils. And then some of you are going to say to me, well, why didn't you end up doing the fender? Well, because there's a chance. And if you come over here, look how much dirt and grime is in there. And there's nowhere else in that fender that I'd feel comfortable mounting that. If you find a place, please mount it there. And the reason why I'm not putting it in here is, again, then you have to drop your fender liner to be able to work on it. I mean, you could mount them technically over here, but again, if you end up having a coolant leak, it's going to get over here too. So you just pick your poison. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to end up remaking this valve cover breather, and I'm going to actually put it underneath the intake manifold too. So that way there's literally nothing in here. When I do this, I might have to extend the alternator wire. We'll see that when I get to it. Once I zap strap it and I know a height, like I said, there will either be 2 ways I do this. One is the alternator field wire is either going to go, and I'll just find a way to keep it nice and tight and in there and bring it up and around, or I might go the long route and then bring it around through here. I'm trying not to put it over here because then that's one more wire through this area, which would just be a pain. But at the same time, if I can keep it nice and tucked in here, then we can get it over here and we can avoid going down this slot. We will see. Again, that, and I'll do the same with the other side where I had the AN 12 line, which I'll just simply put a right angle. It'll go into here. I'll bring it around to wherever I put the oil catch can, and that will completely clear up both sides and just keeps all that heat off the sides for, well, as I should say, if any heat pools, then it's not going to be roasting any wires, and it'll look really clean. The next thing I'm going to be showing you is how to make your spark plug wires. Again, since all our lengths are going to be custom, you just pick up a universal kit. MSD makes some, Taylor makes some, Excel makes some. I went with the ICT, I think is what it is, ICT billet ones. It's actually right on the, yeah, ICT billet ones. Why? Because it's a balance of cost effectiveness and, of course, quality. They make really good quality stuff. I use a couple of their items on the engine as it is, so I ended up going with their plug wires. Going to go ahead and I'm going to install this one, and then I'm going to show you how to measure and make the next one. So what you basically start out with is like a 5-foot wire. Then you have your different boots. You can do straights, 45s, and 90s. For me, I'll be doing 90s, so that way it's easier to route and they don't stick so far off the plugs. Again, there is some for each use. It comes, the ICT ones anyway, with the coil side already done. Once we go ahead and we want to figure out our length, in my case, for my location, since mine are going to be right here on this plate, I'm going to be feeding it, like I said, just right down through there, away from the belt, but between this tensioner area. All I do is I feed it like so. Now I go to the other side and I pull the wire over there. As you can see, I've got my wire there. I have about as much as I want, so that way I can hook up my coil. If you have your coils handy, you can always plug your coil in and then route it exactly how you want it. Hold the wire up to your plug. One thing you can do too is slip the boot onto your plug and hold this right up to the boot. Then you mark it. From there, we know this is the bottom of our boot. I want you to measure 1 inch up, about that much higher. And what we're gonna do is take our spark plug stripping tool, or as I should say, spark plug wire stripping tool. We're gonna crimp it on here and we're gonna pull the jacket. Now, another thing we can do is actually add on about, say, 3/4 of an inch, which is about right here again. What I'll do is I'll measure that out, add that on. So we've got our first inch. This is where we know we want to strip to. The next is we need to know where to cut the conductor, because we're going to have a conductor that's flapping around. So what you want to do is measure 3/4 of an inch or 1 3/4 inches from this line up here, and we're gonna make another mark. At the 1 3/4 inch mark, go ahead and cut your spark plug wire. From there, next thing you're gonna do, you have this tool, or you have, I think MSD has their own, which is a little vise piece. You would put the wire in it, and what you do is you spin the wire with an X-Acto knife in their recessed input, and it should slice about that length, as I should say, and it will strip where we need the conductor. If not, these tools are very cheap. They're about 20-25 bucks, probably at your local hardware store, or grab one off Amazon. And you can see where the cutter is. So line these cutter teeth up with this one. It's going to cut all the way to this insulated piece right here, as you can see, the conductor. And then you're going to cut. I like to cut here and then cut one more time right there, then pull off, and it should take this whole jacket off. I'll show you that in 1 sec. Like I said, you'll get that double cut action going on. And then all it does is allows for a cleaner break off. Now that we have that, we know we can fold it, which is important for our next step. Notice how I have the conductor bent backward. Next thing we need to do, let's see if I can do it one-handed, is you have to slide this piece on like so. Now I've slid too far up. You want it right about there, about 1/8 inch up. The other thing is you want, see how I have the conductor nice and resting against the whole back length as it's bent over? That's what you want. From here, I'm gonna probably straighten that up just a little bit just because I'm OCD and I want that right down the center. Then you're gonna use that blimp looking one, and see how it's got, it looks like 2 of them are kind of round down in the center. Like I said, it looks like a fish or a blimp. Well, what you do is you line the 2 feet up, which are these 2, with the back of the blimp, and as it compresses, it's going to round them into the conductor. Before you crimp, it should look just like that. You should see just a bit of rubber hanging over top, and then when we crimp, it will sink into the insulator. When you compress it, as you can see, it'll look like that, and it's going to hold it nice and tight. Again, you can give it a pull test, but as you can see, it is really holding in there, and that's what you want to see. Because this is the whole spark plug wire. This is just a protector. It's the boot. Kind of gives it a little bit of suction. So the next thing you're going to want to do, take some dielectric grease, and you can cover this thing in it. Now, for some of you, you might be like, well, don't I have to worry? Don't I have to wipe that off? No, you want to cover it in it, especially if you're in salty climates. Once you've covered the connector, and again, you don't have to worry, because if you live in saltwater style climates, this is going to help protect it against corrosion from the salt water in the air. You're going to notice you're going to have a big end and a small end. The small end is the tighter end that's meant for this. The spark plug goes in that end. So go ahead and squeeze the boot in over top. Make sure it's like this. This will make sure the opening for the spark plug is aiming in the right spot. Squeeze it until it's all the way down. If you want, you can go ahead and remove the tape at this point. Slips on smooth like butter. Once you've gone ahead and you've got that, if you want to, this is technically complete. Unless you have to do the coil side, just rinse and repeat. Go ahead at this point if you want to, and you can label the firing order or however you want to label them, so that way, if you're doing multiple spark plug wires, you know exactly where this spark plug wire was made and created for. Now that we have our two measurements, let's go ahead and cut at that 1 3/4 mark. Next thing you want to do, grab your spark plug wire tool, unless you're using the MSD one. At this point, you would line this end up with the MSD block that they give you for the vise, and then there'll be a notch where you put your X-Acto blade. Go ahead and put it in that notch, turn the wire around in it, and it'll cut the wire. For me, since I'm using this tool, all I will do is line up the teeth, that's this jaw right here, on my mark. And all I do is just like that, cut in, and then sometimes I'll even rotate. Just make sure you cut it on the same mark and pull. As you can see, we now have our conductor. From this point, fold that back. What we would be doing is sliding this on, leaving about 1/8 of an inch, and then crimping. But if you notice, this is pretty loose in here. I like to have that a little tighter. So I'll usually take these needle nose and I'll turn them in a little bit. Just like that. We'll see if that works. If not, we might have to do it just a little bit more, just like that. When you do, now, when we fold this around, again, to the back, so that way it slides up the slide or down the slide, if you want to say it that way, and just leave it right about there. Might even crimp that around the wire just a little bit more. I just liked it to be held a little bit more than that there. From here, go ahead. We're going to use this one. See how it's kind of like in the shape of a blimp? It's hard for me to show you. It's kind of like two little fishtail. I don't know. The fishtail lines up with these two ends because it's going to curl it and crimp it onto the insulator. So I might lose my shot here. I'm going to try and I want to make sure I line this up perfectly on my end, just like this, and then bring it down. Again, keeping my position right there, and then go ahead and just like that. It's a little higher than I'd usually like, but it'll still work. Again, now that we've gotten this, let's throw a little bit of dielectric grease on here. Little, a lot, you do whatever you want. After you do that, give it a nice rub down. All right, now that we have that, wipe your hand a little bit, you go to your boot. You'll notice that your boot has usually two different sizes. Smaller side, bigger side. Bigger side's for the spark plug, smaller side is going to be for this end. You want to line this up so the tip of the spark plug, because that's what clips onto the spark plug, is going to line up with the big hole. So again, we're going to slide into the small, and this tip needs to line up with the big. Go ahead, work it in, and just press it in all of the way. As you can see, we're right at our tape line. And look, if you look down in there, you can see the silver tip. That's how you know you're good. Just rinse and repeat if you need to do the coil side. And of course, one thing you can do is use some red tape if you want to and label your wires, depending on if they're going to be visible. If they're visible, a lot of people aren't going to want to do that. Again, just make sure you're hooking the spark plug up to the right coil. If you don't, then you're going to be out on the wrong firing order, and that won't be good. So again, that's why I like to always take a bit of tape, just a little bit down the wire since mine won't be visible with red tape, and then put the firing order on the plug so that way I can't mess it up. Another trick you can do too before you put the boots on is you can throw heat shrink on and write on the red heat shrink if you don't want to use red tape. There are so many different ways to mark your wires. The thing I'm going to recommend, if you have these from your old wires, if you put on the heat shields for the header, go ahead and save these. We're going to actually slide these up and over our spark plug wire tips. And what this is going to do is, since it'll be right next to the header still, this is a double thick blanket of, some of them are made of titanium, other are made of other things. Go ahead and slide these on. They're going to help protect the tip of our wires from our downpipe and our header. Well, if you take a look here, I zap strapped those socks on that I used to have that came down here to the coils. If you remember when I disassembled, I had them on here on the old spark plug wires, and they are titanium socks. They're definitely worth putting on, and I will still even heat wrap over top of them, or at least any exposed wire. After we go ahead and do this, you can see how tight it fits up, so when our downpipe's there, it won't touch any of those wires. What I've done is, let's see if I can zoom in, it goes through the motor mount, and then, like I showed you before, I just fed them under the oil pan, and then right where that tensioner is down there, you'll see all my wires. See how they all come through right there? So that way there's no chance of them getting rubbed off by any pulley or belt. Now you can see they're all right here, and I will strap them once again over here. And again, we just majorly want to make sure it's heat wrapped going down to the oil pan. And if you want, you can even heat wrap all the way from under there to here, just to make sure they don't chafe. But I'll leave that up to you. At least put some sort of protection if you're worried about chafing on the wires, even if you use something like the expandable loom. But for me personally, I'll just use heat wrap. Driver's side's pretty easy. As you can see, you have your wiring that you took with your coil connections right here. Well, now we need to go to the spark plug. So follow the same path, make sure it's on this side of that ground so it holds it away from the pulley. Bring it up here and go to your first plug. I'll give you my measurement in a second. From there, if you measure, it's 4.5 inches to the next plug, 4.5 inches to the next plug, and 4.5 inches to the next plug. So pretty easy. Keep adding 4.5 inches once you cut your first wire. I'll give you the first measurement and then just add 4.5 inches to each additional plug wire afterwards. So start at 35.5, then you can add your 1.75 inches for your boot, or where your cutting is. From there, we'll jump over to 39.5 is the next one where I'm starting the boot. So again, don't forget to add your 1.75 inches, and then from there another 4 inches, 43.5, and then add your 4 inches, which is 47.5. I doubt you're going to be able to hear this, but when you're sinking these on, make sure they're aimed slightly down at the very beginning, so they're aiming straight down, and then you want to press them in. And you want to feel and hear that audible click. Sometimes there's 2 or 3 of them as you're sinking it in. And like I said, do the pull check. You want to make sure that is fully seated, because if it doesn't lock in, sometimes it can click up to 3 times as you press it on. You want that fully locked in, because if it's not and it pops off, oh man, that is going to be a headache to have to change or deal with if it doesn't happen right away and you're on the side of the road. But like I said, just go ahead, get them all up there, and then zap strap them nice and tight. So that way it's up and away from your downpipe. We want to keep it as close. We want to kind of balance it between the header and the downpipe. So that way, no matter what, it's going to be surrounded by heat, but that's why I want to leave these titanium boots on. So that way, that's going to help tremendously. Plus then we're going to add heat wrap to the wire itself. As you can see, they are nice and tucked up tight into here. We can, of course, get them a little tighter. The biggest thing is when I get my driver's side downpipe and I get it to sit between there, I'll have to see how close I am to those spark plug wires. I left a little bit of room so I can move that wire around dependent. So if it is a problem and we do have to come up and over here, I do have enough room so I can bring these wires up and over. Now, very important, you can also pull these back just a little bit at the moment so you can check those boots. You want to make sure those are fully seated. Again, this is a good time to do the pull check to make sure they're still all fully locked in, because when you're zap strapping them up that tight, it can cause them to come loose. Now that I've got all those, like I said, done up like so, later on I will end up probably throwing one wrap of heat wrap across the whole spark plug cluster there of wires, so that way it just gives you that one more added protection to the wire that is exposed when bringing it down and over here. Now we've officially have all our coil wires and all our spark plug wires. Wow, come on Richard, spark plug wires lined up and right there. Now that we have that done, technically the next part of this video, because I have that plate still coming that I'll go into, is if this plate isn't ready from my friend yet, I will be just mounting those turbos back up onto here and we can run our drain and fill lines. One is 7/16 to -4 and this one is an 1/8 NPT to -4. This is important because you need to know what side your feed is, so that way you can buy the appropriate fitting. The other thing you need to know is, are you using ball bearing? If you are, make sure you buy a feed that has a restrictor. You know it has a restrictor because if you look down there, it should be like a pinhole, because ball bearing needs less oil. If you leave it wide open like this, you're going to flood that turbo with oil and you're probably going to start seeing a lot of smoke, which isn't good at all. From there, now that we've gone ahead and gone over restrictors, you also have your feed. Your drain. This goes on the bottom. It has to be much bigger because, again, as I just said, you can't allow oil to back up in the turbos. Otherwise, you're going to get a lot of smoke. So you want the biggest sized opening possible, which is, in our case, a -10. From there, this just screws into the bottom of the turbo. I will show you that in 1 second. There is a gasket it comes with. Make sure you put the gasket on, so that way it doesn't leak on you. If you don't have the gasket, some people will just use a very, very high temperature silicone, but at the same time, I always like to use the paper gasket that these come with. That's just my own personal preference, but again, you can do either or. What you can do is just simply put that over top of the gasket like so, put the 2 screws, line it up, make sure your surface is completely clean, so that way it's going to seal, and go ahead and thread those down and then sink them down. If you really need a torque spec, you could try to go to 19 foot-pounds, but again, most of you are just gonna go with your hand and tighten it up. Just don't go ham, just get it nice and tight. Top one is no torque spec, just go until it is fully seated and then half to quarter turn more. You don't want to go ham with it because, again, if it's an NPT fitting, what'll end up happening is you'll crack the fitting. I believe I already went over this in part 1 or part 2, but I'm going to say it again. Before you roughly just put in like 2 bolts per turbo, go ahead and loosen off all the 13s before you mount it, and loosen all of the 13s on the exhaust side. That way you can rotate the inside so the feed is aiming directly up. It cannot be on any sort of angle. It has to be aiming straight up. If you don't have it aiming straight up, what'll end up happening is the turbo won't drain properly. It'll pool oil and you'll get lots and lots of smoke. Not a good thing. For the feed lines, I'm pretty sure these came from UPP, as they do seem pretty well made. And also, I just checked the routing and it seems pretty legit. So what it is one fitting goes here. I'm gonna pull it out to show you, by the way. And it goes down along through here, just under your radiator pipe here, but down lower, so that way there's no chance of it getting caught in the fan. It gets teed off right there, comes up to here. After you tighten it, see how it's away from the exhaust on this side and away from the exhaust side on this side. Again, I have to turn this, but anyways. Yeah, this looks like the safest way to do it. And then from the T, we're gonna go to our feed. Again, I will give you the lengths when I properly install this, and show you exactly how I end up running it. But I think this will actually work. I actually really like this. Looks clean, hides it, and yeah. Let me pull this out and I will show you the lengths so you can make your own and show you the fittings. So you can better understand this. Again, it feeds down here and down into this area right here. Again, that one feeds down along the lower radiator pipe and then down and over there. And again, it's just below it actually, so it avoids the radiator fan. And then what I did is I have my oil cooler lines coming into here. I just simply fed it along with my oil cooler lines because they go right past that feed plate. So just follow, if you're doing an oil cooler, which you should if you have the factory one, just run it along with those lines and then we'll just duck it out right here to the T. Just like we made the AC line, twist the tip on so that way it eats into the bedding right here and it kind of beds itself until it's completely flush with the threads. After that, just take the tip of your fitting like so, lubricate it with motor oil or blue Loctite, and then go ahead and just screw it in with your hand wrenches. All right, so for the line lengths, this one is 43 inches long, has a 124 and fitting to a straight, which goes to our T. The 90 degree to 90 degree, this line right here is 21 inches long, and again, just two 90 degree fittings. And then our last one is a straight to 120 again, and this is a 13-inch long hose right there. Once you go ahead and put it, just make sure that your T looks like this, the straight, and 190, and let's go ahead and plumb that into the car. So again, this one is going to go from here down to there, and I will zap strap that and take care of it afterwards. You can also bring it up through here, so that way it's held up or held by this harness away from the shock for the hood. There is enough slack. Again, I'm just showing you the rough routing. It goes under this hose and then goes right just under the hose is where I have the T, right where it comes into the radiator. And then this one comes down from here just to where that radiator inlet is. Super easy run. And then the next one, like I said, follows these lines pretty much actually the same way we put our coil lines too, or our coil wires that we extended. Just follow it through there and then you can see my fitting down there. So right by the spark plug, see right there, right under the spark plug boot, that's where it goes. And you can see our drain is still open. And that's so that way we can do our drains next. The drains are going to be more fun. Why? Because with feed lines, it doesn't matter. The oil pump is going to be pushing oil through it, and it's going to make sure no matter what, oil is pumped through. When it comes to the drain, if the drains don't go at the right angle, the turbos will back up with oil and smoke. We must make sure that the turbo drains are always on a downward slope. Either sloped or straight down. That way the oil is always going down. If it bows, the oil will puddle. If it can't go uphill at all. It has to aim down. All right, something for the fittings. Just because I had a couple dings on these fittings because, well, I didn't assemble them, nor did I take them apart when this kit came apart. So what I will suggest that you do is if you pick up some vivid black Harley paint, it'll actually blend every single mar on those fittings. These ones had quite a few, and as you can see, they're looking pretty pristine now. So if you pick this up, it usually comes with a clear coat kit. You can even clear coat it afterwards, so there's less chance of it chipping off. Our feeds turned out pretty awesome. Now our drains, they have to be on a steep slope. As you can see, I've already made them because I'm gonna show you, of course, my lengths and everything, but see how this one is half kind of bent in a weird angle? You need to make sure these stay in a downward motion, meaning when I connect that up, it needs to make sure it's always flowing downhill. If it ever goes up like this, it'll pool, you'll get oil backup in the turbo. If you're worried, you can get an oil scavenge pump and wire it in. I'll leave that up to you. This is one option you do have. From here, I'll pull this out, I'll measure the lines and tell you exactly what my measurements were for these AN10 lines, so you can go ahead and make your own if you're using that ECS block. So as you can see, your first line, you want to make it about 10 inches long, cut it at 10, even add 10 and a half if you want, just so that way you have all the bends out. The other one right here is a, let's say 11 and a half inch line right there. And then this small guy here is about a 7-inch line. This one goes to the turbo. So you need 3 straights, you need 2 90s, actually 3 90s. It's 3 90s all the way around. So yeah, 3 straights, 3 90s, and 1 T-fitting. And again, all AN10. If you're wondering about making it, jump onto part 2 and look at how I made the AC line. I literally show you how to make these lines from scratch. Leave your oil return fitting loose. You need to until you tighten this down with certain turbos like this one, because it'll actually bottom out if you tighten these screws down and they slip closer to the body. You barely have any room, so leave the fitting loose, adjust to where it needs to, you can crank it down, and then you can seat these bolts. As long as you can access them afterwards. I'll show you the angle I go off these turbos, so that way you can do it. Now, don't worry, if what ends up happening is when you do your final adjustments on your turbo, again, we're not gonna tie these completely down and in yet. When we go to do the final adjustments, when we put in our intercooler to line up the piping, we can pop one of these bolts out for a second if we need to move it from here to here, but obviously don't leave the bolt out. You need these bolts to help seal the housing. Well, there we have it. The drains are in, and as you can see, they are all downhill, meaning they will drain perfectly. Again, do not have anything going uphill and you'll be safe. Now for these turbos, before we start cutting up, say this, we're gonna have to, I'm almost 99% sure we're hacking these off. We're gonna have to start mounting the intercooler. Now I have looked and hummed and hawed, and I figured now that this plastic shroud that completely covers the radiator and is also the radiator support needs to go. Now it is supported at the very bottom. It goes right into the metal frame piece. If you look at the bottom, you'll see where the 2 pegs come out. So it's not completely this. So for you guys, I'm pretty sure you are going to have a bracket that comes with it from UPP. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to fabricate my own bracket because I don't have them. And first thing you're going to want to do, take out the 13 mils at the top. This one, and this one. Again, I've already loosened them so that way I can show you. But once you take those out, I'll show you the next bolts. All right, the next thing we need to do is pull out the 2 13s. One right there, and there's one down over here. Wrap my hand around to show you. Now, some people are gonna say this. I already know they are. Rich, take the fan out of the way. It'll make your job a lot easier. I actually like to leave the fan because it protects the front of the radiator from tools. If you want to, go ahead and take this off, but just be very mindful. Even put a piece of cardboard in front of your radiator, just so that way it has some form of protection. Otherwise, as you're swinging ratchets, you're gonna end up bonking it and putting dents in it. Next thing we need to do is pop out this sensor. Simply just pulls out the back. You can leave it dangling if you want, just be careful with it. From there, you're gonna notice you have all this plastic right here. You'll notice that this cooler's on here. We need to take the cooler off. We'll put a box or something, have it sitting here. I have a feeling we're gonna be just flipping it up and putting it against our radiator between the intercooler if it'll fit, but I will see once we do this. Once you have the 4 10s out from here, you can stick a flat blade in here and just pop these clips, that one and that one, so that way it can sit on top of the box. And we'll see where we can relocate this in the time being. Rather than messing with those clips, I simply just pop the Christmas tree tabs out. Now that we've got that, as you can see, this is now flexi. Leave the foam for now. I don't think we have to take that out, but on the back side of that black crossbar underneath there, I believe is the clips that are holding the bottom of the radiator shroud. See if I can light this up with the impact. Right there, on the bottom of the radiator, you'll see 2 10 mils, one there and one right here. make sure you remove those too. Now that I've gotten to this point, I'm gonna go ahead, disconnect my 2 return lines from the main T, and take my 2 feeder lines off, pull the 2 turbos out of the way. By doing this, it'll give us more space, and if we have to, we can take this off just to give us even more space to work with. I got the turbos out of the way. To release the fan is pretty easy. Squeeze the ducktail in the back, slide back. That easy. Take out the 2 here. I have 10 mils because I have a Mishimoto radiator, so it switched out to 10 mils. From there, carefully flex this forward and lift up and get it out of the way. You will have to also release those guys. So grab your panel popper and quickly just pop these 2 Christmas trees. There is one more Christmas tree you'll have to pop. After you have that, just tuck this in and out of the way, just over here. These 2 flip up, so they're like that. You're probably wondering why. You don't want those to go into your radiator. Now that we've gone ahead and done that, like I said, if you want to, take a piece of cardboard and cover the front of this radiator, or at least put a garbage bag or something, just so it doesn't get too scratched up, because we're gonna have to lift it out and kind of put it there so we can get the plastic shroud either out through the top or bottom. If you want to, again, you're probably gonna get more coolant, you can take this whole thing out. Now you'll notice my bottom here is capped because that used to go to that oil cooler, which I've deleted because everyone needs to get rid of that. And like I said, you can release this and release your 2 AC lines again. Don't forget to unplug them if you want to, just to lift the whole radiator piece out of the way, and then we can put it back in afterwards. I'm going to take the little bit more messier way out. Go ahead, squeeze, move this back. Underneath, release your 2 AC lines if yours are already tightened in, and just pull them out and leave them hanging there. We can then lift this out of the way, put it somewhere safe, get the shroud out way easier. And like that, it's out of the way. Like I said, once you get that last pipe off, expect for some more radiator fluid. Yay. I think that's my least favorite liquid in a car is coolant. It just messes with you the most. Anyways, got the AC lines out. Like I said, just pull the bolts off, slide the lines back out, make sure you're disconnected. From here, it's very loose. Let's just mess with it. As you can see, that is completely out now. Just got to wiggle it and play with it and pop up both struts, but you'll get it out. Now, before we go ahead and actually just slip your radiator back in, because you could almost do that now, I don't suggest it though. What I suggest that we end up doing is we move the airbag sensor. We need to move this airbag sensor so that way our intercooler can come in here. We have to do it on both sides. This airbag sensor will move right here, and this one will move right here. We just have to drill a couple holes, and it will simply just click right back into where it needs to go. So, give me 1 sec, I'll get that ready. Once you've popped both these clips off, go ahead and cut them off. You are not going to reuse these, as that is where our airbag is going to be relocated. Next thing we need to do is, see these inverted Torxes? You need to go ahead and we need to loosen them. By loosening them, there's a bolt that will actually, as you tie it in, will release it. So it's kind of reverse engineered. Basically, as you tighten it, the bolt head goes in so you can slide it up and out. All right, so this is your passenger side. What you want to do is measure 1/2 inch and then come in, so it's 1/4 of an inch, and put a dot. The reason why we're going to drill a 1/2 inch hole, it needs to merge, but you just want it to merge. So leave as much space as you can, and then if we have to, we can use a smaller drill bit to merge the holes if you don't quite make it, but you want it as darn close as you can. As you can see on this one, I went to, if you're looking at it from the front of the car, I went to the left hand side. And then on this side, I went to the left hand side as well. That way, this is sitting at its highest point, like this. As you can see, it started here, I drilled a 1/2 inch hole, and then I ended up augering it a bit bigger. And then after that, I drilled a small hole just above that hole, so that way, this airbag sensor could work. And now, with it all the way pretty much out, if I slide it back, it slips in like so.
So just know that it's more than just a 1/2 inch hole. You're gonna have to get creative as you're putting it together. What I will do is I'll measure from here to here. So you want to keep that small hole. You might have to drill it one size bigger just so that bolt can fit in there, because it is a pretty big bolt. And then from there, after you've drilled that hole in just a little bit bigger, like I said, I ended up, I seriously used the bit as a seesaw, brought it over here a little bit, and then up here I drilled a new, with this same size bit, I drilled a new hole up here just above it and then merged the two together, and that is how I was able to get it. I will measure the distance from here to here just to help you out. So from this opening to this opening, straighten a line is just under 1 inch. And then again, you don't really need to come over here with it, but yeah, it doesn't matter. Now that I've got that, take a file, clean it all up so it's not gonna cut your sensor up, especially if it moves in a bit. And the other thing is clean the area, and if you have a little bit of black paint, go ahead and shoot it. I mean, you're never gonna see it, but at the same time, it's always nice to know that it's paint protected. Like, it's aluminum, I'm not gonna do anything with it. Go ahead, slide it in. You can see that one slides in, and this one slides in like so. From there, we can just tighten those up. For me, since I know I'm not gonna be done today, I am going to paint that. Even though aluminum won't corrode or rust, I just can't leave it like that. After you've gone ahead and painted it up a bit, that way it just blends a little bit better, you can go ahead and start vacuuming up all of that aluminum shavings. And I don't think anyone's gonna try reusing your coolant, but don't do it, I guess. From there, after you vacuum clean this all up, let that dry. On those airbag sensors, it was a number 4, by the way, for those inverted torques. Next thing you need to do is with the screw all the way out like so, throw a tiny bit of Loctite down here on the threads. That way when we slip this back in and you tighten it, the Loctite will lock it. You can see it's already got blue Loctite on it, so you're just adding a little bit more. Whatever you do when you tighten these up, hold the inside of the ratchet like so and go ahead and tighten it. If you don't, what'll end up happening when you start going to the back of the ratchet, you could crack that sensor and break it. Don't do that. Plus, you also don't want to strip the screw, because if you strip that Torx, good luck getting it out. Well guys, as you can see, we've got the E-Boost 2, which I've got to put in. I have the blow-off valve that's ready for our intake pipe. And other than that, we have some stuff I have to finish up. But there's nothing more I can do until I either get that brace in, so that way I can mount the intercooler, or as I should say, the intercooler mount. I need to see if my radiator is going to mount off of that, or if I'm going to be changing up this shroud. I can't tell you what I'm going to do with it yet until I get the intercooler mount in. We also have the driver's side downpipe. I've been in talks with UPP, and we're actually trying to work something out about them sending me the pieces. Of course, I'll pay them, but that being said, it's been a slow process. I'm trying to make sure we work everything out. I will let you know how that experience goes now that we're in talks. And if all else fails, I do have said pieces. Me and Dan will cut Humpty Dumpty apart and put it back together again properly. That being said, I'm going to need a little bit of time on this one. I will try to keep you up to date, but I want to get where I'm at right now sent out to you guys. That way you've got my current progress. Know that I'm going to try my darndest to get this stuff going. I feel like I'm on a roll, and I want to get this, if I can, to tuning as quickly as possible. Really, this is like a day worth of modification, and if I have to, we can do that, and if I have to, we'll build an intake pipe, and then I just have to figure out how to build, or how we are going to construct a new thermostat housing, because that current one will not work, the plastic one, and the metal one that I got definitely won't fill up the system. So please stick along for the ride.
Let me know how I've been doing with this. And thanks again for watching. Again, I read all the comments. I really want to, explain as much as I can to you guys. And of course, show you where I'm going with this. Again, thanks again for watching. Thanks for all the support. And I look forward to showing you the next video. And I cannot wait to get this thing on the dyno. Also, on top of this, I want you guys, if you're looking at different twin turbo kits, go check out, I think it's called Performance Supercars. It's really cool. He's got one where the turbos go down below. There's no modification up here. It's literally just, you'd have to take the oil pan off, and what you would do is do your 2 lines out, or you could do the ECS block, but you definitely would need a Turbo Works scavenge pump to bring it back into the system. But he's got a really cool twin turbo kit that literally mounts down there, where you would simply take your old headers off, put these new ones on. You might have to relocate a couple little items, but it literally mounts in so easy compared to this. So if you don't care about having the big turbos up here and you want to mount them down low, please go check out that kit. I'm also giving him a shout out because I've been in talks with him. He's been really helpful for finding out certain wirings and stuff when I go to do this for doing the boost by gear and whatnot. So if I didn't already have this kit, I'll tell you now, it'd be really hard for me not to buy his kit. He's a real stand-up guy. Thanks again for watching, guys. Have a great one.